beauty is the language, we can say, that speaks to every person, regardless of their faith, even if they don't have faith. I mean, a person who doesn't believe in any form of deity or God or anything higher, they just look at the rose. As St. John of Kronstadt says, there's your proof that God exists. Because there is no reason for a rose to be so beautiful. And such things that people apply into their own life, to connect to that spirit, to that beauty, to appreciate it, to sense it, to connect to God's creation and be created. I think those things breed holy presence of God, even if people don't know Christ.
Like Dostoevsky said, beauty will save the world.
Beauty will save the world, absolutely.
Hello everyone, my name is Atsuko, or Anna, and I have Father Vladimir as a special guest today. Thank you, Father, for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm blessed.
We're at St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Palm Coast, Florida.
Yes.
And today I would like to ask you a few questions about Orthodoxy. But before we get into that, could you, Father, talk about yourself?
My favorite topic. I guess where I was born is probably where it begins, and that's Russia. St. Petersburg, Russia, the old capital, and that was then, St. Petersburg used to be called Leningrad. It was in the Soviet period of the Soviet Union. So I can't say that was the best time for Russia. It had its moments, I'm sure, but growing up, I was growing up in Soviet culture that was severely cut off from anything religious, and Christianity, and especially Orthodox Church, that was at the center of Russian culture before the Bolshevik Revolution, definitely fallen under most severe persecution, maybe in history of the world, of the Christian church on its mass scale. And so when I was growing up, I did not have much exposure to church as a churchgoer. In fact, I wasn't even baptized as a child. And there were many reasons for it. So that was reasons for protecting children from the government. And that was part of the culture that basically persecuted Christians. At first, it would be through death and concentration camps. And then eventually it softened in some ways, obviously, compared to that. But it was decades and decades later that I was born, after the revolution, obviously, not that old. But at the time, you still couldn't talk about God and society or school. And nobody taught us anything religious. In school, we never talked on the topics of anything remote to that. And at home, my family wasn't very religious. I would say more of a background that is scientists. My mother is a doctor. My father, neurologist. My father is a physicist. They're still both alive, and thank God. And they were not what we'd call militant atheists, but a lot of Russians, a lot of people were influenced by those ideas of like a very Marxist ideologies and materialism and social things you probably see in China right now would be similar to that attitude in Russia that no longer is the case for Russia, thank God. So that was my initial start. And there are many things that I can talk about, how I experienced some things related to my faith in the first years if that's of interest. But mainly for me was through art, to be. I would say that brought me to the only way you could see God, which we talked about today.
Yes.
And we talked about icons, and we talked, today we are speaking on the day, the triumph of Orthodoxy, which is a feast that happens second week of Great Lent, and Great Lent is a period of very intense fasting and preparation for the resurrection of Christ. Precedes the Holy Week and sufferings, and in the second week, which is just the beginning of that journey, and the journey is that of ascension to go with Christ. We could say, walking with him towards Golgotha. We are asked to kind of get serious about it. That's what appeals to me in Orthodox Church, particularly, and always did, and to many people, is that this is not some like form of a hobby or pastime or occasional optional thing that you do. Your spiritual life requires engagement, and that's what Great Lent, if you were to put it in that context, Great Lent is the most intense focus. It's like the finals before your final exams. You go through the last month for those people who have gone through college, university education. That period when right before you're about to have your exams, you're going through a very intense period. But you can't be in that period all the time. But as we start that period, the second week is the triumph of Orthodoxy, which is we celebrate the holy icons with the church starting from the 8th century. And today is that day. And we were talking about the image, the image and likeness. We're talking about those things that are not some invented concepts. If you are a Christian, you understand that no matter what confession you belong to, you would read the book of the Bible, even the Old Testament. It starts with the probably I would say most important point. We arguably can say is the most important point is that we, you, I, and all of our audience and all the people in this world have been created as God's word tells us in the image. Image is a very key component of what we are. And we were created in the image of God, which is no small thing. And I think that, coming to the ideas of icons that arise here very often for people coming from another Christian denominations of the later times where these things have surprisingly been rejected, misunderstood as worship of graven images, which we often come across as we enter into some kind of polemic with the Protestant worldview, which in our opinion isn't, based on valid perspective, because it's not something that we do. We don't worship graven images. You see icons in churches, and you see images in the churches, but there's a difference in distinction between worship as on veneration. So worship, of course, is only designated to God. And we are doing our services. In fact, we don't even believe that we're serving God. We believe primarily that God is serving us here in the church. But we are not worshiping objects, and that's something to be clear about. These things might need to be clarified over and over because it sets hardly easily with people of the Protestant beliefs. They introduced those beliefs recently, relatively recently. And I don't know about position of, Japan as a culture is definitely kind of connected to two main, as I understand, spiritual paths, not Christian. That would not be the main predominant faith in Japan, but you're talking about Shinto and Buddhist, and in both the image isn't really avoided per se, right? But if you're talking about like pure Zen, then you have much less image, right? You have maybe writing, calligraphy, and some very mild representation. Most of the time there will be no portrayals of Buddha. But in other forms of Japanese Buddhism, you would have deities and Buddhas and imagery, which can have certain parallels to that idea. And then in Shinto, of course, you have all kinds of deities that we will, you know, regard as spirits and things that we don't necessarily deny the existence of, but we do definitely consider that pagan faith, and so it's different from what we profess as Christians. But in all of those areas, you have ideas of temples, you have ideas of or practice of temple life and temple worship, but with a very different, maybe the very different point, as we understand here. So anyway, we got from me to Japan very quickly.
Yes.
But I mean, I'll go back and forth and up and down. But I mean, as far as art, and I kind of brought it to art, and my central study of art began quite early, and that's what brought me to God. Because I ended up attending Hermitage Museum of Art courses for the youth. And Hermitage Museum, for those people who haven't been to St. Petersburg, is one of the biggest museums of art in the world. It's the royal collection of the czars of Russia, and it numbers in literally several million artifacts that were collected by Russian czars, and it can rival with Louvre, and it's an amount of art, and most of it is actually not Orthodox art at all. They have certain sections, but they didn't see it as necessary because they had incredible number of churches and cathedrals where church art kind of belongs for the most part. But for my exposure, I ended up going to study art history and going there once a week to the museum to study with a group of young people my age, which I think I was starting at around 13 maybe, and that was a profound, had a profound effect because I saw so many religious topics from Renaissance, from, you know, from painters that we all would know, from Da Vinci's Madonna that is in St. Petersburg to, you know, Italian masters and Spanish masters and Rembrandt. In fact, Return of the Prodigal Son, the very famous and one of the biggest, and probably I think it's one of the last paintings by Rembrandt known, that is in St. Petersburg Hermitage collection. So seeing all those God-inspired, religiously Christian-inspired paintings had a profound influence, and they were paintings of the highest caliber. So I think it had something to do with the, you know, the intensity and the genius of those people that painted them, and looking at like Botticelli's Saint Sebastian, who is being struck by all these errors. It was my first encounter maybe with the idea of a martyrdom, you know, and or seeing Peter and Paul by El Greco, that made me just feel like I was looking at these incredible presence of these people was felt. In fact, El Greco is Greek, which means Greek. He came from a Greek Orthodox background and worked in a Catholic country, and kind of his style of art was influenced by iconography. As a matter of fact, that's why he has a certain feel to it, which is very different from other artists of his time. In fact, very almost, I would say modern, but kind of groundbreaking, and it influenced Picasso a lot. Not in his Cubist phase, but in his earlier periods. So all of these things kind of link into these lineages of art and culture, and of course it all comes back to the Christian theme in that. In many ways, there's also antique, of course, that exists in that whole classical art space, and that eventually led me to Florence, Italy, which is a long journey to that particular thing as an artist, as a artist and an artist historian, and someone who worked with church architecture at some point, and eventually I got my degree in theology and church confession and architecture. That all kind of continually came together and continue to come together. So all of these things were part of who I am and still are. And I'm still in the middle. We are, as my parishioner here, our parishioner, you see our church being just in a process of creation here. We have our iconostasis behind us, which is what stasis means, something that's stable, something that stays, and icon means image. So iconostasis is something that holds images, and these images are temporary, because you can see this blue background it's still kind of like a canvas, and we hung some icons there, but we're preparing to do a full decorated carving, and now we have these beautiful doors that you may be able to show later, because they're probably behind us and can't see them too well, but we're working on these doors are being worked on or they were made in Georgia, in the country of Georgia. And there I was able to find some artisans that work by hand and also work with very ancient technique of enamel that comes from Byzantium period, from the 2nd century, 3rd century, hot enamel, which in our time is almost extinct as a style of art. And I know Japan has a big place in my heart for having that preservation of tradition, like lacquer paintings, and of course all forms of crafts and arts that Japan has preserved. Well, these classical ancient forms of art may have actually been preserved better in Japan than they have been in the West, because there's we find very few artists that still work in techniques that date back to maybe 3rd, 4th century after Christ. And they exist, but they're very, very hard to find. So one of them is these glass enamels that we use as a choice for these royal doors that we have. And of course, these doors are doors that lead us to the Holy of Holies, as the church is laid out always as the old temple, and that's why we do everything here the way we do in Orthodox Church. And when I was talking to my friend Father Seraphim in Georgia, who helped us to work with these doors, work with artisans there, Michael, who is the person who makes the enamels. And I said, well, Father Seraphim, we are blessed. We're going to have doors that will connect us with Georgia. These are going to be doors to Georgia. And he said, in this Georgian way, he said, no, these will be doors that will connect you to heaven. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people who are finding Orthodoxy and coming to the Orthodox Church, they are fascinated by the beauty and the arts and aesthetics of the Orthodox Church. I appreciate these aspects of the Japanese culture more now that I'm Orthodox. Like going to a temple after I became a Protestant as a teenager, it became something that I could no longer like even walk into a temple the same way. I would immediately see everything as idolatry and something that I should have nothing to do with it. But I have a different approach and appreciation for these aspects of Japanese culture as well.
Yeah. That's a great thing to experience. I'm not surprised. I think, people can take any way, any path to become, you can say, somewhat shut off or very, you can say fanatical even, and you can make anything into, fearfully. We have to guard ourselves from images. And certain images are maybe clearly demonic. And I think if you as a Christian understand that a certain image of a demon is a demon, now there may be different ways that these cultures look at that, but besides the point, this is still not an apologetics for demonic imagery to be filling your home or filling your life, because now we're dealing with media, and as you're talking about images, I mean, of course, Japan has an amazing influence on the world through Japanimation.
Japanimation.
It's gigantic, it's profound. I mean, the style of Japanese animation has probably reached pretty much everybody in this world. Maybe not everybody can appreciate refined classical Japanese art culture, but almost everybody's seen Miyazaki's cartoons. And those images, and Japanese film, of course, as well, and that's another topic. But just to say that you are able to appreciate art that may come from ancient culture and has its own beauty. And when people really create, I think in many ways, creativity is, as we understand, another comeback to image and likeness, because we were created, we are creatures, but we're created God-like, in a God-like intention for us. In fact, only us, human beings, have been given that option to be God-like in the true sense, through obedience, not through our own violation, as we see from the Bible story, where we're deceived to be godlike before or without the blessing to go to the levels that we're not supposed to. But still, being creative is certainly not an act of rebellion against God, if it isn't. But it leaves us open, just like everything else. We can become very creative, and yet art can be very dark. Creativity and genius, probably genius. I don't know what you make of what genius means, because you could say talent and genius are two different things. And maybe a true genius, in true sense, can only serve higher purpose, because it has to be divinely inspired. But talent can be used for wrong things, or for things that are not pure or good in any way. And we have a whole culture of film and Japanimation that we can see as very demonic and very concerning. But when we start to go into classical roots of it, you still see that profound attention to perfection that you find in Japan that is fascinating. It's something that always made me feel very impressed by what Japanese art has. In fact, Japanese culture in general is all about, I think, in many ways, refining and using one's own talents. So you can always find reflections of Christ's message or teaching, I think, in anything that human beings do. Sometimes they do it consciously, sometimes they do it intuitively. As a culture, we seek to make our talents grow, as Christ commands us. It's a commandment. In the parables where he talks about growing, making your talents grow. What are the talents? Those talents are wealth that is given to us. It can be many things. It can be art and things that are passed down through generations from family, master to student, and so on. Those are talents, those are gifts, where entire lives and many lives are given to refinement of certain beauty, which again is language of God. Beauty that isn't relativistic, but we have a sense of aesthetic. There's even a term, theoaesthetic, where beauty is the language, we can say, that speaks to every person regardless of their faith, even if they don't have faith. I mean, a person who doesn't believe in any form of deity or God or anything higher may just look at the rose. As St. John of Kronstadt says, there's your proof that God exists. Because there is no reason for a rose to be so beautiful. And such things that people apply into their own life to connect to that spirit, to that beauty, to appreciate it, to sense it, to connect to God's creation and be creative. I think those things breathe holy presence of God, even if people don't know Christ.
Like Dostoevsky said, beauty will save the world.
Beauty will save the world, absolutely, absolutely. And it's where we really find that bridge, because beauty is available to all. It can also be a temptation, beauty, like everything else. Only God can be without sin. Human beings will make temptation out of God or beauty or anything good, because we have problems that we inherited and that we don't want to part from. But as we try to apply our talents, as we see cultures that do that, I think it's important to recognize that and be able to separate as a Christian. Like you're saying, coming into a temple that may not be Christian at all, you can still see the love and human genius that goes into creation of certain artifacts and objects. I mean, you can see it in the Christian world. Being Orthodox, we may not relate to Catholic dogmas, but or even Baroque or some other forms of art, but we can still have tremendous appreciation for art of Renaissance and earlier or after the schism of the church. There's so much amazing, beautiful legacy of human culture, Christian culture, art and science that has emerged, not entirely in what we believe in the world that we believe in, with maybe aesthetics that we don't even fully find to be in alignment. Well, where we wouldn't put, let's say, nude bodies in the church, where, as an example, where you would see that in the Vatican cathedral. For example, I'm using that as an example because everybody knows, St. Peter's. We wouldn't do that in worship, but they do. Well, does it interfere with worship? In our opinion, it does. That may be where Eastern and Western church has already parted ways